What you're looking at is the literal price tag for the human soul. In 1953, the Central Intelligence Agency didn't just study drugs, they cornered the market. By authorizing a secret payment of $240,000, they purchased the entire global supply of LSD-25 from Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. This wasn't a scientific inquiry, it was the birth of Project MKUltra. Mainstream textbooks describe this era as a time of scientific curiosity in behavioral psychology. They tell you it was about defense. They are lying. Declassified records from the Church Committee now prove that. The US government funded 149 separate subprojects across 86 elite universities and prisons. Their goal, not to heal the mind, but to achieve its total destruction. We're talking about the systematic erasure of memory and the modification of human behavior through drug-induced paralysis and sensory deprivation. You were told the government protects your rights. The archives prove they were perfecting the strategy of containment to eliminate your will. The official story is a shadow. I'm here to show you the light inside the vault. To understand the depth of the deception, you first have to look at the story they sold us. In the official record, the 1950s were an era of moral clarity and scientific advancement. If you open a standard textbook today, Project MKUltra is often reduced to a footnote described as a fringe experiment, born out of simple scientific curiosity in behavioral psychology. The mainstream narrative claims the US government was a defensive player, merely reacting to the brainwashing techniques of the Eastern Bloc. We were told that the CIA's interest in the human mind was purely therapeutic, a search for experimental treatments for mental health and a way to protect our own soldiers from enemy interrogation. The supply chain for this research was supposedly transparent. Small-scale lab studies, conducted by well-meaning scientists in ivory towers. There was no mention of the Nazi scientists brought over in Operation Paperclip to lead these programs. There was no mention of the world's entire supply of LSD being redirected into a clandestine weaponization program. According to the official story, if there were any issues, they were just occasional ethical lapses, the growing pains of a young democracy. But this official story was a carefully constructed mask. It was designed to hide a systematic destruction of files, an institutional commitment to erasing not just the records, but the very memories of those who lived through it. The records tell a different story. In 1973, as the shadow of the Watergate scandal loomed, CIA Director Richard Helms issued a frantic, scorched earth order: destroy every file, every memo, and every ledger associated with Project MKUltra. He nearly succeeded in erasing 2 decades of state-sponsored terror from existence. But he missed the financial records. When the Church Committee began digging in the mid-1970s, they didn't find scientific curiosity. They found an illegal human experimentation program that treated the American public as a laboratory. The declassified reality is that this was not a domestic program. It was a direct continuation of Nazi experiments conducted at Dachau and Auschwitz. The occasional ethical lapses described by textbooks were actually a systematic strategy of containment led by figures like Sidney Gottlieb. Their mission: to eliminate the will of the individual. The archives prove the CIA funded 149 subprojects across 86 universities, hospitals, and prisons. They weren't just studying drugs, they were weaponizing memory erasure. They utilized covert dosing of LSD, electroshock therapy, and total sensory deprivation on unwitting subjects, people who walked into a hospital for a checkup and left with their identities shattered. This wasn't a search for truth. It was the institutionalization of behavioral control. And the proof isn't a theory, it's etched into the very documents they tried to burn. To understand the granular reality of this program, we have to look at Subproject 68. The CIA didn't just stay within US borders. They crossed into Canada, funding Dr. Ewan Cameron at the Allen Memorial Institute. Here, the scientific curiosity of the mainstream narrative manifested as a technique called psychic driving. Unwitting patients were placed into a state of drug-induced paralysis for weeks at a time. While they were unable to move or scream, they were forced to listen to tape-recorded messages, some looped up to 500,000 times. This was the erasure of memory in practice. Cameron wasn't trying to heal them. He was trying to hollow them out to see if a new personality could be printed onto the blank slate. But the proof of the CIA's strategy of containment is most evident in the case of the doctor who knew too much. Frank Olson was a CIA scientist working on biological weapons. In 1953, he was covertly dosed with LSD by his own colleagues. Days later, he plummeted from a 13th-floor hotel window in New York. The official report called it a tragic fall, but when his body was exhumed decades later, forensic evidence suggested he was struck before he ever hit the glass. The declassified records confirm Olson was a security risk who had become unstable due to the agency's own experiments. This is the forensic reality of institutional radicalism. They didn't just destroy documents, they destroyed the people who could testify to what those documents contained. Project MKUltra isn't just a dark chapter in a history book. It is the revelation of a level of institutional radicalism that contradicts the very idea of post-war stability. While the CIA claimed to have destroyed the files in 1973, the strategy of containment they perfected didn't disappear, it evolved. This history reveals an obsession with behavioral modification and memory erasure that challenges our perception of personal autonomy. If the government was willing to fund 149 subprojects to eliminate the will of its own citizens in 1953, we must ask, how do these institutional blueprints shape the surveillance and psychological frameworks of the modern world? The insider reality is that institutions often prioritize strategic supremacy over ethical reparations. By reconstructing these forensic truths, we move beyond the official story and into a world of archival transparency. But this investigation only works if you are watching. What do you make of these declassified cables? Do you see the echoes of psychic driving in today's digital landscape? Let's debate in the comments. If you're ready to look behind the curtain of every official narrative, hit subscribe. The archives are deep, and we are just getting started.